Happy New Year, friends, and welcome to Ariel's Twilight Years. How to be a really old model. It's 2025. It's not when I'm recording, obviously, it's 2024 at the moment, and I'm at home. I've just had minor abdominal surgery. I seem to be recovering okay, which is quite hopeful, and I'm also within 8,000 words of reaching the end of the first draft of my second book. I feel quite conflicted about that because although I'm really eager to get on to the next part of the process of hopefully getting to publication, I've also really enjoyed the experience of writing about my year as I've gone through it. So I will be sharing further details about that in the near future. But today we're going to talk about a subject that came up in the comments for my last video. The comments I got for my previous video, which was my PowerPoint presentation rehearsal for a talk I was about to give about BDSM, porn and shame. The comments were, broadly speaking, incredibly generous, and I really appreciate every single one of you. Thank you to everyone who left a comment. It was really lovely to read them and to see that my experience has had similarities with so many of the people who commented. It's always nice to hear that because so many of us thought that we were doing our kinky journey alone. I don't think I'll ever get tired of hearing from other people who also thought they were doing that kinky journey alone, but actually who were doing something very similar to me, coming to terms with having a atypical sexuality. But one comment I got felt worth discussing further, and I decided to give it its own video. This isn't because it's ostensibly a particularly offensive argument. This person commenting, I don't believe he is trying to be rude. He's just sharing his opinion about porn. But it brought up some issues that I realise I haven't actually spoken about, and I do have some strong feelings about them. So I'm going to read his original comment, which is anonymised, and then I'm going to break down my view about various things that he says in this comment. So this is what he says. I believe that what two people do in private is their business. However, I also believe that pornography is detrimental to a person's health. Pornography, highly addictive because of a compound in our bodies called dopamine, which is the reward chemical. Although sex is natural and very healthy, pornography, masturbation can be very unhealthy and dangerous. Ted Bundy, one of the most famous serial killers, said that he was influenced by pornography, specifically BDSM. Putting that much emphasis on pleasure can be sad. Kink can lead a person down a deep rabbit hole, i.e. unhealthy sexual expectations. Now, I replied to that comment on the day that I received it, because when something makes such inaccurate claims about a subject I know about, I find it quite difficult to ignore them. But there's more to say, and I realise I haven't really talked about what I think about porn, the good that it does, the potential bad that it does. I've never put all of that in one video, so here is that video. Hope you will enjoy it. So to begin with, I'm going to break down some of the things I said in response to him, but there's a lot more to discuss on this issue, so we will come to that as well. So the first thing I wanted to address is the idea that pornography is highly addictive. Pornography is not physically addictive. That much is, for now, the received wisdom from the medical profession. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses currently does not class porn addiction as a real thing, and neither does the World Health Organization. So at least for now, medical professionals as a group do not judge pornography to be addictive. Various religious groups do believe pornography to be addictive, but I don't care if it's based on an ideological opposition to porn. I'm much more comfortable going with some official judgment on the matter. So what I said to the commenter is this. I said, just because an activity releases dopamine, that doesn't make it addictive. Examples of dopamine releasing activities are exercise, listening to music, having sex, playing with a pet, or reading a good book. None of these activities are addictive in a healthy, well-balanced individual, and neither is viewing pornography or masturbation. Some individuals will develop unhealthy relationships with these activities, but without wishing to sound too much like Jordan Peterson here, I do think you have to take some personal responsibility for how much you indulge yourself, even when it comes to something as vital as eating food, for example. So I do find it very strange that anyone would claim that sex, a dopamine releasing activity, is fine, but that masturbation, a dopamine releasing activity, is not fine. It seems to be the received wisdom that, broadly speaking, having orgasms is just good for us physically and mentally, and pornography helps people to have orgasms. So I went on to reply in the comment, if sex with someone else is good for you, which it is, so surely is masturbation. Within moderation for both, obviously, but I think it's an extremely callous and perhaps privileged attitude to say that sex is okay but masturbation isn't. Because not everyone is lucky enough to have a sexual partner. And even if you find a sexual partner, all sorts of things can happen during your life together that may impact upon your ability to have sex as a couple. Stigmatising masturbation is, I believe, a very harmful thing to do when it makes people who are not in satisfying sexual relationships feel guilty or marginalised for that. Furthermore, I believe that masturbation is still healthy even if you are in a relationship. Understanding your own body and how to give yourself pleasure is valuable in itself. And I say this as someone who's lucky enough to enjoy an absolutely sterling sex life. And I stand by everything I said there, having spent a few more weeks thinking about it. I really think the idea that sex with someone else is fine, but sex on your own is not fine, is no help at all to someone who doesn't have a partner to have sex with. I am really lucky at this point in my life to have a sex life that satisfies me. That has not been the case for all of my life, and there have been considerable periods of time where if masturbation hadn't been an option, I wouldn't have been having orgasms at all. And I don't think that would have been a good thing for me. And still, from the vantage point of a sexual relationship that is giving me all the things I want, I still think masturbation is a good thing to do. I still masturbate because I still want to keep that relationship with myself alive. Because if something terrible happened and I couldn't have sex with my partner anymore, I don't want to be completely divorced from how to give myself pleasure at that point. Masturbation is not just for lonely people, but even if it was just for lonely people, it would still be a good thing, because I don't want lonely people to not be able to have orgasms either. Being lonely is bad enough on its own. Before you factor in like orgasm denial, it just seems untenably cruel to me. So, having already said that the fact that porn helps people have orgasms, and that I think is a good enough justification for its existence on its own, I'm also aware that porn can help gain acceptance for a wide range of identities. As I was discussing in the video that this man commented on, porn is how I discovered that I wasn't the only kinky person in the world, that my sexuality wasn't anywhere near as unacceptable or marginal as I'd believed, and that I might be able to find people who would like to do the things that I wanted to experience with me. These were all very good things for me, and as I've seen from people's other comments, these things have been very good for other people too. Pornography can also help people work out their tastes and consider activities they'd like to try. Now, I think I was quite lucky in that the things I wanted to do sexually all occurred to me pretty early in life. There haven't been a whole load of activities I have come across later in life that I've realised I wanted to try. I basically knew I wanted to be hit and I wanted to be restrained, and I like most versions of all of those things. But for lots of people, they have used porn as a way to explore some ideas that they might not be ready to try yet. So by watching other people who know what they're doing taking part in these activities, they have been able to perhaps build themselves a sort of mental shopping list of things they would like to try when they're in a situation where they're able to do that safely. And this is a little bit of a controversial thing, but I also think pornography can, although doesn't necessarily, it can give people watching it an idea of what normal naked bodies look like. Specifically, when we're talking about niche porn, like the sort of pornography I make, the physical bodies of the people who make that kind of porn are not generally this unattainable physical perfection. I am certainly not physically perfect, and the co-performers I tend to work with, although I think many of us are attractive in some ways, we're really not Hollywood beautiful, Hollywood perfect. And so actually, a lot of what I've learned about how a normal body looks has come from porn. That's not the only place it's come from for me. But for some people, people who don't go to naturist or nudist beaches, for example, which is something I've done, for people who don't get to do that or haven't got to do that, porn is a decent starting point. I would add the caveat that when you look at very highly produced mainstream American pornography, there certainly, at least in the past, has been a certain level of ubiquitous, big boobs, thin bodies, big lips, big hair, no pubic hair, no body hair, big dicks. There is a certain type of porn which I would say probably does perpetuate a bit of a physical perfection myth. But by no means as much as mainstream Hollywood does, because apart from anything else, porn companies can't afford the level of post-production that a full Hollywood movie can. So I think there is a case to be made for not wanting people to view the most highly produced mainstream pornography at the exclusion of all other kinds of pornography. I mean, but no one's trying to do that. I think that that's a bit of a straw man argument. You can choose as a consumer to only watch that sort of porn, and then yes, you probably will end up with a rather negative view of your own body in comparison, but you don't have to do that. You can go and watch much more real world looking people having sex. So if you're sensitive to that stuff, by all means, choose the pornography that will have a more positive effect on you rather than a more negative effect on your own self-image. So thirdly, I got onto the topic of Ted Bundy and serial killers, because I think perhaps this is the most pernicious argument of all, because it's the one that is tabloid and frightening enough, I think, to make people feel like pornography should just be shut down if they believe it. So what I said in response is, Ted Bundy is not statistically significant. The increase of accessibility to BDSM pornography has not led to an increased number of serial killers. In fact, based on the last statistics I viewed, it looks as though increased availability of porn has coincided with a decrease in sexually motivated murder, which doesn't mean that the decrease is caused by pornography, although you could argue it might. It might be partially the cause, but it certainly doesn't seem to have caused the opposite, an increase in the number of sexually motivated murder. I read the last Ted Bundy interview myself, and it's interesting that he does blame both BDSM porn and alcohol for his crimes. But he just simply doesn't seem to have had the strength of character to take responsibility for his own actions. Millions of people every year watch BDSM porn, and as a pornographer, I'm well aware of how very popular it is. And it doesn't make them want to murder people. Similarly, millions of people every year drink alcohol, and it doesn't make them want to murder people. Ted Bundy is responsible for his crimes, and trying to lay the blame for his violence at the door of the BDSM community is totally inappropriate. Consent is everything in BDSM, and one thing I think we can be sure of is that Ted Bundy did not have an appreciation of even that most basic concept. If he had, he wouldn't have murdered anyone, and his victims would have lived. And that is all I want to say on the subject of Ted Bundy specifically. The idea that he tried to blame consensual pornographic images made by people who fully consented to being in those images and made for people who understood that murdering people was not a good idea. The idea that he tried to blame that art form as opposed to blaming himself. Oh, I just think it's disgusting, which is not surprising. I mean, he was a serial killer. I really do not feel inclined to take the purported opinions of Ted Bundy into account here, just as I'm not inclined to feel sympathetic towards sex offenders who try to claim that it was porn that made them do it. I think it would be very convenient for you to believe that you'd just been a helpless victim of pornography coming along and changing your brain chemistry and making you go out and do horrific things to people who didn't consent to it. Well, that would be very comforting for you, but I don't think we need to take the word of a sex offender who doesn't want to take responsibility for themselves over the word of a whole bunch of medical doctors who are telling us in official publications that pornography is not addictive. The one common argument that this comment doesn't address is the idea that pornography is bad for the performers who are part of it. So I do want to address that. It is a point that people make a lot. And I would say that For about 3% of pornography performers, it does look as though some coercion has been historically involved in it, which is horrific. So about 3% of pornographic performers, up to this point in history at least, have been trafficked on some level. Now obviously trafficking is a very dramatic word, and trafficking in reality can be a rather less dramatic thing. It can be your nasty coercive boyfriend driving you across state lines to be in a porn film that you didn't really give informed consent to be part of. So I don't want to kind of over dramatise the situation by talking about trafficking. But it's certainly true that from time to time people are coerced into making pornographic work. That's true. But for 97% of us, we have chosen it. And when we get to the really privileged 50% of porn performers like me, we are shooting exactly what we like. Sometimes even we are shooting specifically what we like sexually and nothing else, in the conditions that we have chosen, selling to the customers who we want to sell to, and we are very much in control of what we're doing. So yes, while there are sex workers who would rather not be sex workers, that is true, and I don't want to try to erase their stories. For a majority of us, pornography is something we've chosen for ourselves. And I don't think this gets talked about enough, but pornography can be a really great job for people with health difficulties, for example, who can't commit to being well enough to work 5 days a week for 8 hours each day. I am one of those people. I have a health condition that would sometimes make that very difficult. It's also a great job for people who are ambitious but who are from poor socioeconomic backgrounds and perhaps didn't have the support to get into further and higher education. It can also be a refuge for people who come from chaotic families, because pornography provides a way for people without a great deal of formal education and without much access to capital investment at the beginning of their careers. It allows them to run businesses where they're in control of what they're doing. And I don't feel like we hear about that enough. Now, I am not from a poor socioeconomic background, and my health difficulties are certainly less severe than plenty of people in this field that I know. But I do come from a difficult family. You know, growing up in a religious cult is a very non-ideal start to life. And I do think I've been far more successful in this field than I would have been if I tried to go into quite a wide number of other jobs that I think I probably have the brain power for, but I had enough insecurities and anxieties and mental health problems as a result of my background that I think the relative gentleness and the relative autonomy of working in this field has been really good for me, and it's allowed me to be far more financially successful than I think I'd have been able to be in the cutthroat world of corporate law, for example. Do I want to claim that pornography is always good for people? No, I don't, because people are really varied and the way we respond to all sorts of things can be very diverse. So here are some reasons that I think pornography sometimes isn't great for people. From time to time, consumers get too dependent. Not addicted, but dependent. I think sometimes they obsess in a way that isn't healthy over specific performers. I think some consumers end up spending more than a wise amount of money on their pornography, and I think sometimes consumers end up spending more time than is strictly healthy watching pornography. I think these things are, broadly speaking, within your control. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Come and sit down. I'm talking about some of the ways in which porn isn't always good for people. So I'm just talking about how for some consumers they might end up getting too obsessed with a performer. They might end up, yeah, we match, spending too much money, or more money than they can really comfortably afford, or they might end up spending too much time, more than they can comfortably afford. And I think in my life I have probably sometimes spent maybe not so much too much time, but maybe too much mental energy on it. How about you? Do you think any of those three things have affected you? Anything you're comfortable sharing, of course.
I probably, from time to time, spent a bit more money than I should, but it's never gone into my overdraft because of it or anything.
No, but I think, sometimes people who are vulnerable in one way or another, like if they haven't got enough nice stuff going on in their life, I can see how porn is like a fairly cheap, fairly easy way to give yourself something nice in the day, a little bit like fast food is.
Yeah, I was going to say, like it's no worse really than having bought myself a Chinese takeaway when I really shouldn't.
Yeah, I know when I'm really busy on tour, the only thing I can do that's nice for myself in a day is, watch a YouTube video in bed and eat a chocolate bar, and in those situations that's what I do.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Are they the best things I could possibly be doing with myself?
No, but
probably
it's what
not.
I've got the time and energy to do.
And I still deserve to have a nice time. As I said, yes, some models, about 3% according to statistics that Ayla did, about 3% of models are trafficked or coerced in some way. So that's not great, but we'll come on to what you can do about that as a consumer. Some partners are distressed by their partner's use of porn. That sometimes does seem to cause some friction in relationships. I mean, I think a lot of that could be addressed by simply having less stigma and shame about porn use as a society.
About porn use and about differences in sex drive. If your partner is not wanting sex as often as you are, perfectly fine to go off and enjoy some pornography.
Yes, and it seems like currently a lot of people, if their partner does that, they feel kind of cheated on. And I think it will be really healthy for people to not see watching pornography as this kind of emotional betrayal. But obviously that's a question of educating our society, so I hope everyone watches this video. That's what they jolly well need to do. Have you ever felt distressed by my use of porn?
God, no.
No. I really like your use of porn. I'm really interested in the stuff that you watch which has no appeal to me, because it kind of teaches me some stuff about you that, I'm not going to learn through doing it with you.
Yeah.
And it sort of reminds me who you are, not just as half of this couple.
Yes,
but,
indeed. Yeah,
but
indeed.
you. And that's one of the things I was saying earlier about why I like masturbating. I want to have my own sex life that belongs to me. I want to keep reminding myself of who I am sexually, not just as half of a partnership, but who I am. If I lose my partner, I don't want to be completely divorced from what my personal sex life on my own is.
I mean, I think I'm a little bit more resilient against that sort of thing than you, but I don't see why it should have to if you're mature and can have a conversation about it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so another thing that isn't always great is that sometimes children gain inappropriate access to porn. As I get older, I become increasingly concerned about that. I'm not quite sure why.
Okay, as I get older, I increasingly don't give a stuff about that.
I mean, one thing I do realise, as I get older and have discussions about this, is that bloody everyone, not just post-internet, but everyone saw porn before they were old enough to.
Yeah, so it's not a new problem.
No, it's not. I mean, you can see a lot more variety now, I think, than you could do, and it's more within your control, because I think once upon a time, it sounds like you found, porn magazines in bushes, and you looked at whatever you found, whereas now, if you were a 12-year-old who realised they were into bare feet, you could go and search out that. And I can see that brings some more problems along with it, because I guess you're more likely to look at porn that actually does something for you, and that is complicated. I don't want 12-year-olds having sex with each other, and I don't want anyone being exposed to porn when they're not ready to cope with what they see. But I don't think that's the responsibility of pornographers to solve the problem.
I don't market to children, and you can't buy my stuff if you're a child.
No.
So anything beyond that is on to individual responsibility and parental responsibility.
Yeah, I don't think you can hold children responsible, but you can hold the people who are providing them with internet kind of responsible. And we don't have children, so we're really fortunate in that we've not had to deal with that particular challenge. But knowing what's on the internet, and I don't mean just porn, I cannot imagine being okay with my 9-year-old having a smartphone that's got access to YouTube even.
No.
As a YouTuber, I'm very, very well aware of some of the darkness of what's on YouTube.
I just think it is. The reason that I don't give a stuff is that I think it is a societal issue far beyond my reach to do anything about.
Yeah.
And I'm damned if I'm going to stop either consuming or producing it because of that risk. It's just not fair.
No, I feel quite strongly that, the majority of people in the world are adults, and so I don't think it's reasonable to try to child safe the whole world.
No.
We've got tobacco in the world, we've got alcohol, we've got cars, we've got aeroplanes, we've got all sorts of things that are perfectly safe in the hands of an adult and are not safe in the hands of a child. And we just have to navigate that situation by situation.
Yeah.
So we don't give children driver's licenses. We don't sell pornography to people who don't have credit cards yet. And I think we can take some responsibility. But the idea that we shouldn't have pornography for adults because we don't want it accessed by children, I don't think that's reasonable. Is addiction a realistic issue? No. I really just don't think it is. Having done some further reading, I become more and more convinced it just isn't. It might be habit forming and you might have to manage your needs. You might have to manage how much you indulge yourself the same way as you do with food or with alcohol or with video games or with internet shopping. Is escalation an issue? Do people start off watching mild stuff and end up watching illegal, extreme stuff? I mean, 21 years of being in this business tells me no, not normally. I'm sure there'll be some edge cases, but essentially, I think we're just handed our sexualities. We can't do anything with them, and they tend to stay pretty stable through our lives. And again, that opinion is borne out by the World Health Organization and the other one, I can't remember what it's called.
DSM.
What does it stand for? The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses. So, no, basically, I don't think you should worry about that either. Does masturbation stop people wanting actual sex? I think it can do a bit, but again, that's kind of within your ability to manage.
Stops them wanting to have bad sex.
Yeah. And I know that, and I was talking to a friend about this, if I use my vibrator too much, I become a little bit desensitized to it. And I just have to manage that.
Yeah.
If I overindulge, my pussy goes numb. And it takes longer and longer to come, and I find it harder to get sexual pleasure from other things. That's fine. I just control myself.
Yes, in the same way as like when you get full from eating nice food, you have to stop.
Yeah.
You get sated. This is good.
Yes. And you need to take responsibility for learning that, because if you carry on, you might end up vomiting, or if I carry on, I end up with a numb pussy.
Yes.
And one of the things about being an adult
is to learn.
Just have to manage that.
Yes.
Yes. It's not good for me really to have more than like 2 orgasms a week. I've learned they get less good. And they take longer to achieve.
Yeah. It's varied with me as I've got older. Definitely, it's fewer and better ones rather than when I was 16. Oh God, you don't want to know.
I kind of do want to know.
Upwards of 10 in a day sometimes. If I'd been in a position where I couldn't have any orgasms for a week.
10 in a day!
If not more. Yeah.
Were they good orgasms?
Absolutely fucking necessary orgasms.
Lol. I never had 10 in a day.
Well, you're
not my own. Oh my God. Wow. Okay.
We need to go fairly soon.
In half an hour? In half an hour?
No.
Oh no, you're right. Anyway, okay, well that's fine. Okay, these are some things you can do if you're worried about pornography harming yourself and society. 1, buy from genuine providers who are not being trafficked because they're all over social media being very keen on what they're doing. 2, buy. Don't get free stuff. Buy it, because then you know where it's coming from, you know who produced it, and you know that they are benefiting from your purchase. Make sure that pornography isn't the only dopamine releasing activity that you do. Ensure that children you care for don't have unlimited internet access, and be brave and go and meet people, just like I want to say to anyone who's in danger of becoming addicted to internet shopping or video gaming. Video gaming, is that what it's called? Gaming. Because it is scary going and meeting real people in real life instead of just doing stuff that makes you feel good in your bedroom. And sometimes you have to force yourself to do it, because staying in your bedroom and doing stuff that makes you feel good is really nice. Thank you for listening. I've looked at the clock wrong because I find numbers hard. So I'll be back next month with more. Please comment below. I might turn your comment into a whole video. You never know. Thanks for listening as always, and it's goodbye from me, and goodbye from Howell, and goodbye from Gareth. Bye bye now. Bye bye. Bye bye now. Bye bye.